finished.
Of all the unexamined assumptions and criteria upon which the world has based the daily life of mankind, the Gregorian calendar is by far the greatest and most profoundly unquestioned instrument of control ever perpetuated upon the people of Earth. The use of this calendar is an artificial way of counting time. There is no logic or scientific relation between the exact length of the year used by the Gregorian calendar to measure and divide a year. Although the calendar for the Mayan, Hindu, Judaic, Islamic, and Chinese people remain today, the Gregorian calendar measures daily affairs.
Well, my understandings of the Gregorian calendar was that it was instituted around the 1500s, somewhere in there, by Pope Gregory. And the idea was behind it to be able to govern specific days primarily for commerce and to look at the world in terms of delivery schedules and trying to organize our civilization in order to be productive. Production is the key to any nation's ability to survive. The problems that we have with it is the days of the calendar are filled with days of celebration, but not to reach into our heart, but to buy something, to consume. We are tax-producing units, and with the Gregorian calendar, the way it's been set up, and because our language is not spiritual, we are constantly looking outside of ourselves for all of the answers.
Our calendar here, for instance, the Gregorian calendar, it is based, it's organized from the birth of Jesus, the presumed birth of Jesus. But there is something more profound about it. If you look at the Gregorian calendar, the basic idea is that we revolve around the sun year by year, and it counts the number of revolutions that the earth has made around the sun since this birth of Jesus. And we think, okay, that's the only way, that's a natural way of counting time, that's a good way of counting time. This whole way of basing a calendar on this endlessly, more or less endlessly repeated revolution of the earth around the sun, it fosters a worldview where life is like a constant going on a never-ending carousel or merry-go-round, and life is not going anywhere.
From 1981, when I first encountered the sacred count of days of the Maya called the sacred Tzolk'in, the 260-day cycle, I had a measure from which I began to question where did I get my calendar and where did I learn to tell time from a watch? Because as a woman, I never really trusted the Gregorian calendar. I knew that when I went to see my doctor and he told me when my babies were going to be born, that I knew it wasn't accurate because there is a different timing frequency that is contained in the body of woman, which is our natural timing frequency. The Gregorian calendar is an irregular measure of time. And knowing the Mayan time cycle, I could begin to understand that the current Gregorian calendar that is now the standard for the whole planet was actually an instrument of control. And actually the Gregorian calendar was codified in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. And it's very interesting when you begin to think about the fact that we're all living on the Pope's calendar. And so my discovery of the timing frequencies in relationship to the Maya count and the Gregorian calendar was a discovery of our need to return to natural time, to trust our internal timing.
So as we look at time, whether on a calendar or within the cycles of the universe, the cycles of the solar, the lunar, all these different aspects that we actually calculate time with, You know, as indigenous people, we've tried to go in consistency and balance with this. The Gregorian calendar, of course, was developed, I think, partly by religion. Religion was created for the convenience of man to control the populace, to gain power and wealth, and to otherwise control people as how they are affected in their beliefs, but mainly, I think, to have them do what the leaders and what they wanted. And like, again, I think it was a lot about control.
The Gregorian calendar is codified after the doctrine of discovery, which assumed that the Christian church had the power to take any land owned by non-Christian peoples. This doctrine led right into the codification of the calendar, allowing for a method to control people for economic and political measurement of time. The historical context in which this calendar became a fixed standard could be the greatest manipulation of our time.
Was it intended that way? I can speculate and say yes, it was. And I have to look only at the beginnings of Christianity that came together to bring the warlords together, and then later it was reconstituted into Roman Catholicism in Africa with the intent of giving the Roman Empire a book of authority and a church behind it. Okay? Very, very deceptive. They did not succeed by taking the philosophy into the rural areas, because there the people had a strong attachment to the earth. They took it to the cities where they were successful, where people were suffering, where people were being used, and they gave them a promise. So that way it's successful, and today we are a world of consumption.
European power, prompted by an acquisitive material greed, created the church's need to gather all souls under its cross. No one could receive the blessings of Christianity without first accepting the Gregorian calendar. Is it possible that since then we have merely been living an era in faith and time?
You know, we don't think about it, but we're using a calendar, the Gregorian calendar, that constantly tells us that life is not going anywhere. We're just on this ongoing revolutions year after year after year. And so it tells us a worldview where life has no purpose, and creation has no purpose, evolution has no purpose. It's just about this endless repeated cycle of the earth around the sun.
But the thing is, what the Gregorian calendar and the 1260 frequency can create in our minds or even in our biological cycles? Well, because we're living in a world that is rushing all the time, people is getting stressed because they don't have not even time for their own families, and that is what we think that is wrong about the 1260. The ancient people, they were living in a natural cycles, not being aware about, oh, I need to be in this specific place at this time, because they were following natural cycles. But us, our society, our world right now, everybody is following this unnatural timing frequency, what we call the 1260. And that's the key to understand the Mayan code. The Mayan code means to understand what is time. That is the key.
We may think that the Gregorian calendar is simply a logical way to divide our time, and that the mechanical clock allows humans to gather promptly at an appointed hour. But have we ever asked ourselves if these ideas negatively affected the way we live our lives? Do you think this Gregorian calendar affects the human psyche?
I think by osmosis it certainly has, for the reason I'm telling you. We use the calendar today to figure out when to pay our bills, whose birthday it is. to buy something, when to go get groceries, when our bills are due. That's not what the calendar was meant for.
We should go deeper when we look at these things. We should realize that a calendar is not that arbitrary a choice as we might say. It is something that we take it for granted, and it really very